This is the 98th episode of the Effective Executive Podcast and YouTube channel. And I've titled this episode Performance Goal Stupidity. And maybe it's clickbait, but I think you'll understand after we have this conversation. I'll call this the paper plate story. And it is a story relayed through our family from people that we know, that they ordered something from Amazon and they got a package in the mail, and this is what came: a paper plate. That isn't what they ordered, but just a paper plate in the Amazon packaging, not a box, but just the soft packaging. And so they called up Amazon and said, "Hey, we got a paper plate. Is something missing?" type of thing. And the Amazon representative said, "No, this is a vendor that does fulfillment for us. That's trying to meet their performance goals. So if they don't have the item, they ship something anyway, a paper plate." Not sure what the original item was, but I know it wasn't a paper plate. And so that's what they got. And somehow the performance goals that Amazon put to this vendor makes this okay. And we talk about being an efficient executive versus an effective one. Now, sending a paper plate in place of something else to meet a performance goal is at a minimum not effective. It may be efficient from meeting their contractual goals, but this is why performance goals, this is an example of why performance goals can be super damaging. I mean, think about it. They didn't have the item at the fulfillment center. They found a paper plate. I don't know if they just went to the lunchroom. I don't know how many of these happened. That's another question. And put it in, packaged it up, put postage on it, sent it out. The customer gets it. Now they've got to make a phone call to Amazon. How does this make any sense from a contractual standpoint and from a customer viewpoint? You get a paper plate, you're calling in. All this is waste. This is pure waste. And I see this over and over again in organizations where they have these performance goals. And it's not just at the vendor level, right? It can be at a department level. It could be at an individual level. I can remember when I was traveling overseas regularly that Northwest, this is back in the days before Northwest merged, but calling someone on the phone about my travel to an overseas airport that I had not been to, and trying to get the specifics of not only the airport, how it's set up. So I'm having a conversation, a number of other details too associated with my flight. And the representative on the phone from Northwest basically said, "I got to go now." And I thought, okay, well, maybe they have to go use the restroom. I have no idea. And I said, "Oh, okay. Might ask why." And they said, "Well, I've used up my 10 minutes I'm allowed to be on the phone with a customer." So guess what I did? I had to call back and get the rest of my questions answered about this flight. So there's enormous waste in some of these performance goals that people put out. I'm going to, at the end of this, I'll give you how I approach it with my customers, my clients in organizations. But one of the things that I find in a lot of organizations is they have some variation of what they call SMART goals. They have to be specific, they have to be measurable, they have to be attainable, they have to be realistic, they have to be timely. And so it's the acronym for that, which is what SMART is, which I think is completely dumb. But what happens a lot of times with these is you have a tendency to get tunnel vision. In other words, you don't see the entire system, and a lot of times it's just set up that way. If everybody does their piece correctly, then things will work out, and that's never the case. So get tunnel vision on meeting up this performance goal and getting a paper plate instead, because I checked the box. And so tunnel vision of I've got to meet these contractual requirements. ISO, excuse me, 9000 was the same way when it came out. Check the box, check the box, check the box. Didn't really improve anything. And so you wind up with this kind of tunnel vision around what you're supposed to be doing. At an individual level, especially, you don't think that your performance goals and your performance appraisals don't impact an individual and what they're going to do correctly or incorrectly in association with how your system is set up. It's so asinine that it's funny. But it's not funny from a waste standpoint. It's not funny from a customer perspective. So the specific goals need to ultimately change to something different, and I will get into my solution, but in essence, it's going from specific to systemic or synthetic types of goals. One of the things you find with contracts, especially when you have partitions between, let's say, an organization to a different organization that they're contracting with, or an individual with an organization as far as their performance, or department types of things, is I can't be responsible for things that are outside of my control. And that obviously makes a lot of sense. So we wind up doing specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely goals that make zero sense. But, they're realistic and they're very specific, but they don't help your end-to-end system. And these partitions between the individual and their manager or department setups or organizational setups have to be viewed as one thing as the customer sees it. And the customer has always been the one touchstone that you can go to, because they don't care that you contracted out your fulfillment center to another vendor. Because it's almost, when you talk to organizations, it's almost like, well, let me wipe my hands free of this because it's not really my fault. When you're talking to an agent, or our company's fault because we contracted it out to somebody else. So customers don't care. That's such a lame excuse that people put forward. So what's the replacement for this? Well, you have to be able to look at your end-to-end system, which I take through in my executive program. You have to have customer measures, and I use something called a customer creed, meaning that by virtue of going through and studying your customers' interactions with your organization, you're going to find out what's important from a customer perspective, and you'll come up with almost every time, I completely replace all of their measures that they have in place, because they're things like what we're talking about, the smart stuff. So then you wind up with synthetic measures or system measures, as opposed to specific performance goals that are not connected to anything that the customer needs out of your particular system, and actually becomes a barrier for them. So what you have to do is, if you have a vendor, and I've done this multiple times with many organizations, when we got to have a contract between the organizations. No, let's start out small. Let's do some things. You've heard me talk about small scale before. Start out small. What is your capability? Because if it's a new vendor, let's say, is the new vendor even capable of delivering your service? Are they short people? Understanding that system should be the first thing that you go through with any new vendor and helping them understand what that end-to-end system looks like, and then working together to come up with measures that make sense. So as opposed to specific measures, systemic measures should be what you're after. So that's what I wanted to cover this week. I hope this is helpful to whether you're working with individuals on performance goals or departments or organization to organization. It doesn't matter. You need to reassess what it is you have set up in your current system and how it's performing, because otherwise you're going to wind up with paper plates. Unbelievable. Anyway, that's what I wanted to cover this week. I'll catch you next week. And remember, there is always a better way.